So we have a theist on the line that I'd like to get to. And,
oh, that's true.
Yeah, so moving right ahead, Reuben from Austin, Texas. Hey!
I know you.
You do?
I've met this guy. Yeah. You are the same Reuben, right? No?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, you met him too.
Oh, you're the Reuben I called on the first episode?
Yeah. From the spray
Oh,
painting.
Reuben! Okay.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, what do you got?
Yeah, so thanks for taking the call. I told the moderator or whoever answered, my question is, what would be evidence that you would, that would convince you, I guess, to become a theist? I guess, presumably, right, because we talked last time I called in that you shared your story of how you came to atheism.
Sure.
And presumably it's on evidence, right? So presumably you would be looking open to evidence otherwise, right?
Yeah, I was having a good amount of conversation with Hamish. You want to go first, and I'll follow up?
Sure.
Do your thing, brother.
Do you know how little I like this question? Or are you just... Well, no. All right, Reuben.
No, I didn't. You know what? No.
No. I refuse to back down. So it almost depends on precisely what kind of God you're discussing. So presumably you mean what evidence would it take for me to be persuaded that, just under 2017 years ago, Jesus Christ died on a cross for my sins, forgiving me and all of the other people for original sin, which is created in the Garden of Eden, ellipsis.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess that's a very specific example, right? But I guess could you even broaden it out just to generic theism?
I mean, I can try. So a transcendent, all-powerful being that wanted me to know that it was a transcendent, all-powerful being.
Yeah, I guess that's more broad, but sure. Generic theism.
Okay, so I'm somewhat familiar with problems of mental health that people can experience, and indirectly familiar with having heard stories of, and there's actually some hilarious YouTube videos of people tripping on psychedelics. So part of the problem with any of the, how am I in space without this? And then Venus turns into a frog that tells me, hey, actually, you can't see the face of God, in one of the conflicting passages that says something about the face of God.
The Atheist Community of Austin, by the way, does not promote drug use.
That's yes, accurate.
It is not the position of Talk Heathen or the Atheist Community of Austin to do psychedelic drugs. Go on, Jamie.
Well, now you've made it sound okay. Well, that being sandbagged by that aside, the problem that I run into is that the explanation, I've experienced, an auditory or visual hallucination, is something that is a concept that I'm familiar with, right? It's something that happens to varying degrees to people even when they don't have a mental health problem. So it would probably take something like a group of people that I could be reasonably sure weren't all in on something, having like a set of experiences and various sort of independently verifiable events happening around the globe where are you familiar with the movie like Bruce Almighty?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that would be a very good first step if, Morgan Freeman wants to convince me that he exists. He plays God in that film.
Oh, hell, Morgan Freeman.
Yeah, well, no. All right, you got on me for accidentally saying true in response to someone, so, all right. But it's very complicated because the claim, there's a transcendent, all-powerful, all-knowing, general, deism plus intervening in not just the world but the universe, God, it's a very difficult thing to claim because the statements about, what would this God want can be entirely conflicting. So I don't have a very simple, short answer, right? In the same way that some people would say, oh, what would it take you not to believe? Oh, the bones of Christ, done, right? I don't have a bones of Christ inverted answer. But and I'm borrowing a line from Matt here. If there is an all-knowing, all-powerful God, then that all-knowing, all-powerful God presumably would know, and presumably would, if that all-knowing, all-powerful God wanted me to know, let me know.
That's a good line.
Yeah, I can't claim it.
No, but
So I know it's not a satisfactory answer, but part of the problem with addressing reality with a level of scientific skepticism is you don't always get a satisfactory answer.
Yeah, I think I think I follow you, and I think it kind of makes sense what you're saying, right?
Mm-hmm.
I guess so I'm kind of coming back to what was shared 2 weeks ago when I called in and you guys shared your story, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so some of that story, if I remember correctly, right, it kind of started from an emotional ground of, hey, I'm seeing.
That was me. That was Eric.
Mm-hmm.
I think both of you kind of shared a similar observation that kind of got you going on the road to atheism. It's this emotional
not as much,
reaction
but
to, hey, I'm seeing my family, or I'm seeing people in the church not act in a way that I think is, morally good.
All right. To be clear, sorry, just to jump in, I know that's what started you.
That's me. Not
believing in it.
Not him.
That's what got me from, oh, well, I don't believe a God exists, to I should volunteer at the ACA. So the getting to the point where I could call myself an atheist wasn't really prompted by an emotional thing for me.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair.
I just didn't want you to go on like a long bit based on
the long diatribe on that. Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
That's fine. So what I'm saying is, some of this, what fuels this kind of, based on what I heard, right? Some of what fuels this thinking of, hey, this religion thing or Christianity or God proposition doesn't make sense. What I gathered from 2 weeks ago, and then also just from what I observe in my talks with other atheists, is definitely this emotional response where they see people don't act in a way that I think is morally good. Therefore, the God that they serve or worship, whatever, probably doesn't exist, because they're basically following their own intuitions, their own what they think is good morally, blah, blah, blah.
No. Being the emotional person, I can actually speak to that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Right?
That can get someone to leave their church, certainly.
Yeah, but then they find another church that works better for them. So really, we can go two ways with this, because you kind of took this in two separate ways. The first is what would get us to move toward theism, right, or accept theism, and the other is seeing emotional differences in the church. I'm kind of a little more interested in talking about the former. I do want to let you know.
Yeah, we're running short on time.
Yeah, and so I kind of got to pick. So
clarify.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, I wouldn't want you to concentrate on the whole, emotional thing. I was just using that as a jumping off point in saying that, in what you just described to me in this phone call, saying, you might expect, this is a grand claim, this theism is a grand claim, and so I'm going to be looking for some really probably, the whole extraordinary claims needs extraordinary evidence type thing, so I'm going to need to see something very great. But my question would be then, does it need to be extraordinary?
Yes.
If the emotional kind of gets you going on the road to atheism, why wouldn't something as simple as maybe an emotional experience or something much simpler than these extraordinary claims that you're bringing up, that I need to see people having audibly heard from God and they need to prove it type stuff? Can it be something simple?
I actually can totally see why you get there. The difference is I don't know if you heard our talk with Hamish. We were talking about tools in your toolbox of determining...
The hammer of empathy.
Yeah, what you use to decipher and understand the world around you, your epistemological toolbox, right?
Yeah.
I have way more tools in my toolbox now than I did when I was a believer. And because of that, I do look for evidence, and I do try and my best. I mean, I make mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes, but I do try and follow a logical reasoning when it comes to something like that. And I think it's reasonable to expect that when you're talking about burning in hell forever, or, you know, coming up with explanations for the beginning of everything, abiogenesis, trying to explain how we're here, trying to give purpose to everybody's lives, to tell people, you know, they're going to see their loved ones again after they die. There's just so much to it. I mean, this is such a large, overarching thing that colors our culture, that it's kind of necessary, isn't it?
You mean necessary, that extraordinary evidence is necessary?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. What I would also say in response to that is that it's not just extraordinary claims requiring extraordinary evidence. It's the evidence for a claim needs to match that claim, right? In the same way that when a conspiracy theorist tells me that a conspiracy of intelligent frog people runs the world, I need to see something that matches that, right? The evidence I need to see for that, it has to be equivalently strong, right? Like, and not just because the claim is strong, right? So if you told me, oh, hey, this child, they were definitely eating cookies in between meals and they were sneaking them away, that's not really that outlandish a claim, right? Because children like cookies, these are all things we're familiar with, right? We're familiar with cookies and their production, we're familiar with children and their appetites, but I'm not familiar with anything that we can reasonably call a miracle or conclude that's a miracle, or I'm not, you know, familiar with anything that we can call a reliable test of whether or not people can get information by praying.
There's just no framework for it.
Yeah.
Well, that's where I guess I would defer in saying that I guess you're trying to make a distinction between certain types of claims, where I would say, I mean, any claim about reality is just that. And so I think you hit the nail on the head when you said the evidence just has to match up with the claim. Meaning, for me, any claim about reality, like you said, I saw this kid eating cookies out of the cookie jar in between breaks. What is the evidence that I would be looking for? It's just simple evidence of maybe a video, whatever, video recording.
Or missing cookies and crumbs.
Crumbs on the face.
Yeah.
Circumstantial evidence, stuff like that. What would we expect if this were true? And the same thing, I think, with a theistic claim or even an atheistic claim, any claim, is I'm just looking for evidence that would suffice, evidence that would explain and kind of answer the questions that come from that. It's not that it's an extraordinary claim, it's just a claim, and there's... I don't need to be looking for quote-unquote extraordinary evidence. I just need to be looking for evidence that would
so what I
explain.
Sorry.
Yeah, I was going to say, just look at the omnis. I mean, take any one of them, right? Omnipotence, omnipresence, omnibenevolence. Can something be all something? I mean, all powerful. Is that even a thing? And I mean, we measure electricity, we measure potential energy. What is power? What is a unit of God power? And how do you know what all of the God power is? And there's not, I mean, and that's just one of them. When you get to all of the others and the conflicts that they have with each other, it's just, but if you follow Jamie on it, if you lower the bar and you say God, whatever, you know, your deity is, has no contact with us, you pray, and it's basically just the same as having no God at all, then okay, fine.
Well, that's why I want to get into the point of those questions are valid, but I think, for me at least, those would be more of secondary questions. You know, when I'm talking about generic theism, I'm just saying, is there anything that in this world that we can see or experience? That's where I was getting the experiential aspect from. That would answer the question of, hey, is theism true? Is there something more than just the materialistic universe around us? And is there evidence for that? What kind of evidence would I be looking for? I'm not necessarily trying to explain the omnis. I'm just saying, is there something that explains my experience? So people experiencing, quote unquote, supernatural things in their life, I think that experiential evidence should count, should be valid. But it seems to me that you might be discounting that for some reason.
No. So the problem that I'm having generally is with what definition you would use for generic theism. I think that if you clearly define, okay, what God am I looking for? Does God type Christian plus or minus whatever, right? If you say, okay, does a God exist that always strikes people dead if they don't believe in Jesus Christ and go into a church? That one is very easy to test, and I can tell you the answer right now. But if you're going to say like, oh, is there anything that we can kind of fit into some kind of cultural idea of what a God kind of is, yeah, like the fact that these bookshelves have been here for so long and we haven't had to, fix them or anything is a level of, oh, thank you, God, right? There are people that complain about how much packaging there is on a pair of scissors and say, see, it's Satan trying to prevent me from getting these scissors, which I think we can agree is just a ridiculous amount of packaging that doesn't necessitate a claim that Satan is...
Do I just not buy enough scissors? This is not a thing for me.
Well, I think you perhaps don't spend enough time with people that would tell you that the packaging around scissors is Satan.
Reuben,
but bringing it back home is what I'm saying is if you want to ask a question, does a God exist? Define the God and then think about what the world would be like if that God exists.
And
I get what you're saying. There could be like an infinite amount of permutations, right? Of how you can question or how you can create the question. But maybe the corollary would be much easier to answer. What would you expect if atheism were false?
Well,
the question of if atheism were false is precisely the same as if a God exists.
That's what I'm saying. So, but both, I think it would help maybe understand what perspective or what kind of evidence you'd be looking for.
Sure.
And again, it would depend on what kind of God I was looking for evidence of.
And getting to your evidence, when you're talking about weighing evidence and experiential evidence, just as advice for anybody, and not just you, the most intellectually honest thing a person can do is say, I don't know. And when there's something unexplained, the most intellectually honest thing to do is say, that is unexplained, right? The dishonest thing to do would be to jump to a conclusion that you don't have a reason for. So you can put all of the unexplained things into a bucket and you have a bucket of unexplained things. You do not have proofs for anything. So that's why it doesn't hold weight, because the honest thing to do is say, I don't know, and the amazing thing to do would say, let me study it. Let's create a branch of science that we can go in and create the tools and the metrics to be able to describe it and go into it and learn about it. That's the wonderful thing to do. The dishonest thing to do is say, I have an answer and I'm just going to pull it out of nowhere and give it to you. Right?
Yeah, I think I wholeheartedly agree with that approach, is saying, when you first come across some, quote unquote evidence that's been presented to you that you're not familiar with, for sure, your first answer should be, I don't know, but let me look into it. If this is important to me, I'm going to look into it. But then, like you said, at some point down the road, as you're looking into the evidence, you're no longer neutral, right? You've had some time to consider evidence, and at some point you're going to have to, I guess, even if it's just like an inch across or an inch on one side, you're choosing a side for all intents and purposes. So I wholeheartedly agree with that. My main thing is, if you ultimately, have you put any hard thought into what would I expect or what would convince me, going back to the original question, what would I be looking for to challenge my current belief system in atheism, what would I be looking for? What would have to be true or what would have to be false in order for me to consider, hey, maybe my current worldview is incorrect?
To be clear, do you mean what would it take for me to believe in or rather to not be an atheist, I believe in a God, or what would it take for aspects of my worldview to not be something that I continue to hold? Because, I mean, the answer is yes in both cases, but in part I want to distinguish those two things.
Yeah, I guess I'll shoot for the moon, and I'll just say atheism being false.
Okay, so atheism being false is a weird way of phrasing if a God exists, right? So it depends on the kind of God you're talking about, again, and if it's a kind of the sort of generic cultural idea I mean, you and I both live in the United States, like a generic American, well, actually, it also depends on what kind of cultural God you believe in. Oh, there's a God, and America is his favorite country, and he picks who wins and loses elections, and he sends hurricanes because gay people are too gay, or whatever. It would kind of take those things lining up to be even a start, and they also don't. But if you're talking about, a kind of hippy-dippy God, then I would have to look at more like whether hippy-dippy God type things are more likely to happen. Again, I don't have the bones of Christ style answer for that, but I can tell you that no, on not just a weekly basis do I put myself out there to be exposed to reasons why I should believe in a God, but on a more than weekly basis, because I have conversations in between Sundays and do look at things on my own.
No, that's fair. And I guess from my perspective, from what I'm hearing, I just believe that what you just explained to me, it just seems a little too rigid. It just seems a little too like you're looking for too much. For me, I would just kind of maybe even just start at our more fundamental level. Not necessarily, let me pick a permutation of God that's been described to me, and let me see if that one's true or false. I would just try
Precisely.
to maybe break it up more piecemeal and say, what would I expect for this little portion of atheism or theism to be true? Does it line up with reality?
But I have to know what theism in that sentence would mean specifically.
Yeah,
because again, there's God will strike you dead if you don't believe and you enter my church is one that can be tested very easily.
Well, maybe even thinking off the cuff a little bit, but trying to be as clear as possible. So maybe starting off with, one of the aspects of God might be a creator, a creator of the universe. Right? I think that's something that's kind of been historically thought through and agreed upon, is a creator of the universe. What would I expect to see if there is indeed a creator versus...
yeah.
Right?
Well,
yeah. So, sorry, for a second I thought you were saying historically it had been talked about and everyone had agreed that God created the universe. And I was about to say, no.
That's not a thing.
No, you're talking to two people that don't believe that God
even
exists.
reasonable.
But yeah, and there's ways of looking at that. And I not only do this show and volunteer for the Atheist Experience, which you can watch later today on a different YouTube channel, but calling in this same number. And I do look at those ideas, and I continue to look at them, and I'm very happy to continue having these conversations and continue examining these ideas, but I would kind of also ask you to examine your beliefs as well.
This is a really great place to segue. I'm sorry.
Reuben, we're running.
Reuben, I want to give you so much more time to talk. You are super interesting to talk to. I absolutely love that you are taking it this far and pursuing these. And I think I could speak for the both of us when I say we want you to call back. We want you to call earlier, and we want to give you some more time because we want to flesh these out. Does that sound okay to you?
No, that sounds good, guys. Thank you for the time.
Absolutely.
You can also email us at mail@talkheathen.com. And find us on Facebook. Yep. Sorry, there's also a...
Yes, and if you want to see other people having that conversation, you can also like, subscribe, and share the show with your friends.
And
shameless
watch later today. Yeah.
All right, Reuben, but you take care, brother, and we'll talk to you later, okay?
All right, guys. Have a good week.
All
All
right.
right, you too.
Thanks for calling in.